The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. They were old. They were powerful. And they had never once failed to bring a new species to its knees. The council was made up of 17 elder races. Some of them looked like giant insects, with shells of black metal. Others floated through the air like clouds of glowing gas. A few were made of living crystal that sang when they spoke. They were all ancient, and they all shared one belief: the galaxy belonged to them. Their method was simple. When they found a new civilization, they did not attack right away. They watched. They studied. They learned everything about the new species. Then they sent a message. The message was always the same: pay tribute, or die. In 12,000 years, every species had chosen to pay. Some fought back at first. Their worlds were burned to ash. The survivors always surrendered after that. It was easier to kneel than to die. Ambassador Zethril was a Vorani. His people were tall and thin, with gray skin and eyes like black pools of oil. They had served the council for 6,000 years. And Zethril had personally delivered the tribute demand to 11 different species. He was good at his job. He knew how to make lesser beings understand their place in the universe. His new assignment was a species called humans. They lived on a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. The council's scouts had been watching them for 50 years. The reports were interesting. Humans were young. Their civilization was only a few thousand years old. They had only recently learned to travel between stars. Their technology was primitive compared to the council's ships. Their weapons were crude. Their bodies were soft and weak. They lived short lives, rarely more than 100 years. But the scouts had noted something strange. Humans were violent. Not just toward other species, but toward each other. They had fought wars that killed millions of their own kind. They had built weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. They had come close to wiping themselves out several times, and yet they were still here. Every time they fell, they got back up. Every time they broke, they put themselves back together. The scouts did not know what to make of this. Zethril did not care. He had seen violent species before. Violence without power was meaningless, and humans had no real power. They would kneel like all the others. He sent the tribute demand on a quiet morning, Earth time. The message was transmitted to every human government, every military base, every communication network on the planet. There would be no confusion about what was being asked. The terms were standard. 30% of all planetary resources would be given to the council each year. 10,000 humans would be sent as laborers every month. All human technology would be shared with the council. All human military vessels would be reduced to a small defense force. Humans would not expand beyond their current territories without council permission. In exchange, humans would be allowed to live. The message included a demonstration. The council had recorded the destruction of a rebellious world called Kareth 7. The video showed council warships surrounding the planet. It showed beams of light striking the surface. It showed continents burning. It showed oceans boiling away. It showed 7 billion lives ending in less than an hour. Zethril expected fear. He expected panic. He expected humans to spend their 6 months of response time begging for better terms. In Geneva, on the shores of a calm lake, the leaders of humanity gathered to discuss the demand. High Counselor Laura Bennett was 63 years old. She had gray hair and tired eyes and hands that shook slightly when she was angry. She had spent her whole life in public service. She had seen humanity at its worst and at its best. She had never seen anything like this. She read the tribute demand aloud to the assembled leaders, presidents and prime ministers, generals and admirals, scientists and diplomats. They all listened in silence. Admiral Kevin Price was the first to speak. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He had commanded humanity's combined space fleet for 10 years. He knew exactly how outmatched they were. Their fleet is massive, he said. Thousands of warships, each one bigger than anything we have. Their weapons can crack planets. We have maybe 200 combat-ready vessels. The math is not in our favor. Defense Secretary Maria Santos pulled up more data. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. She had spent her career studying threats to humanity. This was the biggest threat she had ever seen. "They have done this 47 times before," she said. 47 species. Every single one surrendered. The ones that fought were destroyed. Completely. Not defeated. Erased. Dr. Paul Griffin was the science advisor. He was a quiet man who usually stayed in the background. But his voice was steady when he spoke. "Their technology is at least 300 years ahead of ours," he said. "Probably more. We cannot match them. Not in 6 months. Not in 60 years. The room fell silent. Laura Bennett looked at the faces around her. She saw fear. She saw anger. She saw despair. But she also saw something else. Something that burned behind the fear, like a small flame. "So what do we do?" asked the president of the European Federation. "Do we surrender? Do we kneel?" Laura Bennett thought about her children, her grandchildren, all the generations of humans who would live under alien rule. She thought about what kind of life that would be. She thought about what kind of people they would become. She thought about all of human history. All the times they had been conquered. All the times they had been enslaved. And all the times they had risen up and fought back. "We have 6 months to respond," she said slowly. "They expect us to negotiate, to beg, to plead for better terms." She paused. "We will not give them what they expect." Admiral Price leaned forward. "What do you have in mind?" Laura Bennett looked out the window at the lake. The water was still and blue. Birds flew overhead. Children played on the shore. It was a beautiful day. It might be one of the last beautiful days humanity would ever know. "We send them one word," she said. "Just one." "What word?" asked Maria Santos. Laura Bennett turned back to face them. Her eyes were no longer tired. They were burning. No. The room erupted. Some people shouted that she was insane. Others demanded to know if she understood what she was proposing. A few sat in stunned silence. But Admiral Price smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had just found a reason to fight. "No," he repeated. "I like it." And so the decision was made. Humanity would not kneel. Humanity would not beg. Humanity would look at the greatest power in the galaxy and speak a single word. No. The message was sent exactly 6 months later. One word. No explanation. No negotiation. No fear. Just no. Ambassador Zethrol had delivered the tribute demand to 11 species in his long career. He had seen many responses. He had seen desperate pleas for mercy. He had seen offers of even greater tribute than requested. He had seen proud warriors break down and weep. He had seen entire governments collapse under the weight of fear. He had never seen anything like this. The human response arrived exactly 6 months after the demand was sent. Zethrol was in his private chamber on the diplomatic station when the message came through. He opened it, expecting pages of negotiation. He expected lawyers and diplomats to have crafted careful words. He expected them to argue for better terms, while ultimately accepting their fate. The message contained one word: no. Zethrol stared at his screen. He blinked, his dark eyes slowly. He read the word again. He ran a diagnostic on his translation software. Perhaps there had been an error. Perhaps the full message had been corrupted in transmission. There was no error. The translation was correct. The message was complete. Just no. He played the audio file that came with the message. A human voice spoke the word clearly. It was a woman's voice, calm and steady. She said the word in the human language, called English first, then the message repeated in every known galactic language. 17 different versions of the same word. No. 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 Zethrol felt something he had not felt in centuries. He was not sure what to call it. His heart beat faster. His skin felt cold. There was a strange tightness in his chest. He called for an emergency meeting of the full Galactic Council. The council chamber was vast. It had been built 10,000 years ago on a station that orbited a dying star. The red light of that star filled the room with a bloody glow. 17 platforms floated in a circle, one for each elder race. The platforms rose and fell slowly, like boats on a gentle sea. Zethral stood at the center of the chamber. He felt very small. The representatives of the 17 elder races looked down at him from their platforms. Some had bodies. Some were just light. Some existed in ways that lesser beings could not understand. "I have received the human response," Zethral announced. His voice echoed in the vast space. High Arbiter Mokthren leaned forward on his platform. He was an insectoid, ancient beyond measure. His shell was cracked with age. His many eyes glowed with cold intelligence. He had led the council for 300 years. He had overseen the subjugation of countless worlds. "Read it to us," Mokthren commanded. Zethral took a breath. "The response is one word. The word is no." Silence fell over the chamber. It was a heavy silence, thick and strange. The elder races looked at each other. Some made sounds of confusion. Others simply stared. "Surely there is more," said Mokthren. "A conditional statement. A request for extended negotiations. Some explanation." "There is nothing more," Zethral replied. "I have checked multiple times. The message is complete." They simply said no. A member of the crystalline race spoke. Their voice was like glass breaking slowly. "This is not possible. No species has ever refused. The consequences are made clear. They must understand what will happen." "Perhaps they did not receive the demonstration footage," suggested a cloud of glowing gas that represented the Etherian collective. "They received it," Zethral said. "Our probes confirmed that the footage was played on every major human broadcast network. Billions of humans watched a planet die. They know exactly what we can do." "Then they are insane," hissed Commander Vithnar. He was a Kreeth, a species bred for war. His body was covered in armor made from his own bones. His claws could tear through metal. He commanded the Council's military forces, and he had never lost a battle. Insane or stupid. Either way, we will burn their world and move on. This is not complicated, but High Arbiter Mokthren raised one of his many limbs. The chamber fell silent again. "In 12,000 years, the Arbiter said slowly, no species has ever simply refused. They have resisted. They have fought. They have negotiated. But none has ever looked at our power and said no without any attempt to change their fate." He turned his many eyes toward a platform that floated slightly apart from the others. On that platform sat Kethora, the Council's chief analyst. Her species had no physical form. She existed as patterns of energy that could think faster than any computer. "Analyst," Mokthren said, "what do you know of these humans?" Kethora's energy patterns shifted and swirled. "I have been studying them since we first made contact. They are unusual." "Unusual how?" "They are violent," Kethora began. "More violent than any species we have encountered. But their violence is not random. It is purposeful, strategic. They have fought wars among themselves that lasted for years. Wars that killed millions. And at the end of each war, they did not try to prevent future wars. They tried to build better weapons for the next one." The chamber stirred uneasily. "They have a concept called spite," Kethora continued. "It is difficult to translate. It means the willingness to harm yourself in order to harm an enemy. They do not just want to win. They want their enemies to lose, even if it costs them everything." Commander Vithnar made a sound of contempt. "Primitive emotions. They will learn fear when our ships darken their skies." "Perhaps," Kethora said. "But consider this. They built weapons capable of destroying their own planet. Not to use against us. To use against each other. They split the atom, and their first thought was how to make a bigger bomb. They created diseases in laboratories. They invented machines that could think, and immediately asked how those machines could kill." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Every species develops technology for survival. Humans develop technology for destruction. It is their first instinct. It is how they think. High Arbiter Mokthren was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before. You believe they will fight. I believe they have already started, Kethora replied. Our probes show massive industrial activity across their solar system. They are building something. Many somethings. They have not spent the last 6 months preparing to surrender. They have spent it preparing for war. Commander Veithnar laughed. It was a harsh, clicking sound. Let them build. Let them prepare. Our fleet will crush them in days. Their primitive weapons cannot harm us. You may be right, Kethora said. But I would remind the Council of one thing. We have conquered many species. We have destroyed those that resisted. But we have never faced a species that responded to certain death with a single word of defiance. We do not know what that kind of species is capable of. The chamber fell silent once more. The red light of the dying star filled the room like blood. High Arbiter Mokthren made his decision. We will send a subjugation fleet. Standard size. 500 warships. Commander Veithnar will lead the attack personally. Veithnar clicked his approval. But, Mokthren added, we will also continue to study these humans. I want to understand them. I want to know why they said no. He paused. I want to know if we should be afraid, the Council agreed. The order was given. 500 warships began their journey toward a small blue planet. And in that chamber, surrounded by the most powerful beings in the galaxy, something changed. A seed of doubt had been planted. A question had been asked that had no easy answer. Why would any species choose death over submission? They were about to find out. While the warfleet traveled through the dark between stars, analyst Kethora continued her study of humanity. She sent thousands of invisible probes to Earth. They watched. They listened. They recorded everything. What she found made her afraid. She had studied many species before they were conquered. Most of them reacted to the tribute demand in predictable ways. Their leaders argued. Their populations panicked. Their military forces made desperate plans that everyone knew would fail. There was always chaos. Always fear. Always the slow acceptance of defeat. Humanity was different. On the day after the tribute demand arrived, there was fear. That was normal. People cried. People prayed. People held their families close. But by the second day, something changed. The fear was still there, but it had transformed into something else. Anger. Kethora watched humans gather in their cities. Not to protest. Not to demand surrender. They gathered to volunteer. Military recruitment centers were overwhelmed. Factories that made civilian goods switched to making weapons. Scientists who had spent their lives studying peaceful things began working on ways to kill, and they did it all with a strange kind of joy. Kethora did not understand this. When species faced destruction, they became desperate. They became sad. They did not smile while building bombs. They did not laugh while training for war, but humans did. She found a transmission from Admiral Kevin Price. He was addressing the combined human military forces from a station orbiting Earth. Behind him, through a window, she could see dozens of warships under construction. They think we are afraid, the Admiral said. His voice was calm, almost cheerful. They think we will break because we are young. They think our technology is primitive. They think our species is weak. He smiled. It was not a kind smile. Let them think that. Let them come to our home with their ancient ships and their old ideas about how the universe works. Let them find out what happens when you threaten 8 billion people who have spent their entire history fighting each other. We have been practicing for this moment since we climbed down from the trees. The soldiers listening to him cheered. They chanted words Kethora could not translate. Something about never giving up. Something about fighting to the last. She reported her findings to the council. The 17 elder races listened in their vast chamber. They are not preparing to die, she explained. They are preparing to fight. And they are preparing to make that fight as painful as possible for us. Commander Vithnar dismissed her concerns. Brave words. All species make brave words before they are crushed. What can they actually do? Kethora showed them. The humans had spent their 6 months well. They had built orbital defense platforms around Earth. Massive stations bristling with weapons. They had mined their asteroid belt and armed the rocks to fall on any attacker. They had constructed hidden bases on moons and planets throughout their solar system. But the weapons were what disturbed Kethora most. They took the atomic weapons they had built to use against each other, she said. And they made them bigger. Much bigger. They call them planet killers. They have enough to destroy 100 worlds. The council stirred. They also developed biological weapons, Kethora continued. Diseases designed to target specific species. They have been studying our genetics from the samples our probes left behind. They are building plagues to kill us. More stirring. More unease. But the most dangerous thing is not their weapons, it is their minds. She showed them footage from human history. Wars that stretched across generations. Soldiers who threw themselves on explosives to save their friends. Resistance fighters who endured torture without breaking. Ordinary people who chose death over surrender, again and again, throughout their bloody history. Every species has a breaking point, Kethora said. A point where the cost of fighting becomes too high. Where survival becomes more important than pride. She paused. I cannot find humanity's breaking point. I am not sure they have one. High Arbiter Mokthren's many eyes focused on her. What do you mean? What? I mean they would rather die than submit. All of them. Their leaders, their soldiers, their civilians. Even their children are being taught to resist. They have a phrase for it. She accessed the translation. Give me liberty, or give me death. They do not see survival, under our rule, as survival at all. They see it as a fate worse than extinction. Commander Vithnar clicked his claws impatiently. Then we will give them what they want. Extinction. My fleet will arrive in 3 standard cycles. We will burn their planet. We will destroy their ships. We will kill every single one of them. Problem solved. Perhaps, Kethora said. But I must tell you about one more thing I found. She showed them a recording from a human military base. Defense Secretary Maria Santos was speaking to a room full of officers. We cannot win this war, she said bluntly. We all know that. Their fleet is too big. Their technology is too advanced. If they want to destroy us, they will destroy us. The officers nodded. They already knew this. But we can make it cost them, Maria Santos continued. We can make them bleed. We can hurt them so badly that they will think twice before attacking another species. And even if we die, even if every human dies, we can make sure that the galaxy remembers us. We can become the species that made the great Galactic Council afraid. She smiled. It was the same smile Admiral Price had worn. They wanted tribute. We will give them a different kind of tribute. We will give them a war they will never forget. We will give them nightmares. And when they tell stories about us to their children, those stories will be warnings. The recording ended. The council chamber was very quiet. High Arbiter Mokthren spoke slowly. They know they cannot win. Yes, Kethora confirmed. And they are fighting anyway. Yes. Not to survive, but to hurt us, to make us remember them. Yes. The old Arbiter was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than it had ever been. In 12,000 years, we have never faced such a species. We have faced warriors. We have faced fanatics. We have faced those who fought because they thought they could win. He paused. We have never faced a species that fights because losing is not the same as losing. Commander Vithnar stood. Enough talk. My fleet is almost there. In 3 cycles, I will have answers. Real answers. Written in fire and blood. He left the chamber to join his ships. The other members of the council watched him go. None of them said what they were thinking, but Kethora knew. She had seen the fear behind their ancient eyes. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Galactic Council was not certain of victory, and they were right to doubt, because somewhere in the darkness of space, 500 warships were flying toward a species that had already accepted death and decided to make it mean something. The universe was about to learn why you should never corner a human. The Council fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the human solar system. 500 warships hung in the darkness like a swarm of metal insects. Each ship was massive, covered in weapons that could crack moons. Together, they carried enough firepower to burn a dozen worlds. Commander Veithnar stood on the bridge of his flagship. Through the viewing port, he could see the distant yellow star that the humans called Sol. Somewhere near that star, on a tiny blue planet, 8 billion beings waited for death. He felt nothing but contempt. All the worry, all the concern, all the fear from the council chamber. It meant nothing here. Here, there was only power. His power, and soon, these humans would learn what power really meant. Status report, he commanded. His second officer, a young Kreth named Drothmar, checked the sensor displays. All ships accounted for. Weapons, systems ready. No damage from the journey. And the humans? Drothmar hesitated. Unknown. Veithnar turned. What do you mean? Unknown? Our sensors detect electromagnetic activity near the third planet. Significant activity. But Drothmar checked the readings again. I cannot locate their fleet. There are no organized formations. No defensive positions that match standard patterns. They are hiding, possibly. But even hidden ships produce heat signatures. Energy readings. Something. Drothmar looked confused. It is like they are not there at all. Veithnar clicked his claws thoughtfully. He had conquered 12 worlds himself. He knew the patterns. Defenders always tried to meet attackers at the edge of their system. They tried to delay, to buy time, to show strength. The humans were doing none of these things. Perhaps they have surrendered, suggested Drothmar. There would have been a transmission, Veithnar replied. No. They are planning something. Proceed toward the third planet. Slowly. Watch for traps. The fleet began its long journey inward. They passed frozen worlds at the outer edge of the system, balls of ice and rock that held no life. Nothing moved. Nothing transmitted. The silence was complete. They reached a massive ringed planet. Its moons should have been perfect positions for defense stations, but the sensors showed nothing artificial, just rock and ice and endless silence. This is wrong, Drothmar muttered. Veithnar did not respond, but he felt something strange in his chest. Something his species had bred out generations ago. He did not recognize it as fear, but it made him want to turn the fleet around. He ignored the feeling. Commanders did not turn back. They reached the asteroid belt, millions of rocks floating in a vast ring around the star. Perfect for hiding ships, perfect for ambushes. The fleet slowed even more. Sensors swept every rock. Nothing, nothing, nothing. And then they found the first buoy. It was small, barely larger than a transport pod. It floated among the asteroids, transmitting on every frequency the Council used. Drothmar put the transmission on the main display. A human face appeared, a man with dark skin and tired eyes. He spoke calmly, as if he were discussing the weather. This is Daniel Carter of the Earth Defense Forces. You are entering human space. You have been warned about the consequences of your actions. Turn back now, and you may survive. Continue forward, and you will learn why our species looks up at the stars and feels not wonder, but hunger. The message ended. The human face disappeared. Veithnar stared at the empty screen. Hunger. The word echoed in his mind. What kind of species felt hunger when they looked at the stars? Destroy the buoy, he ordered. Continue forward. D.O. A beam of light from the nearest warship turned the buoy to dust. The fleet moved on. They found more buoys, dozens of them, then hundreds. Each one carried the same message, the same warning, the same calm voice promising that something terrible waited ahead. Veithnar ordered them all destroyed. But with each one, the strange feeling in his chest grew stronger. They reached the fourth planet, a red world the humans called Mars. Sensor readings showed structures on the surface. Domes, towers, roads, but no movement, no heat signatures, no signs of life. "It is a colony," Drathmar reported. "Recently abandoned. They left everything behind." Where did they go? Toward Earth. All of them. 8 billion humans had lived on that small blue planet. Now millions more from their colonies had joined them. They were all gathering in one place, all waiting. But for what? The fleet entered the inner solar system. Earth grew larger on the view screens. Blue and green and white with clouds. Beautiful. In its way. Strange to think that something so pretty could produce something so ugly as humans. Vithnar gave the order to prepare for orbital bombardment. The weapon systems hummed to life. 500 ships formed a sphere around the planet. In minutes, they would begin burning the surface. Continents would melt. Oceans would boil. 8 billion lives would end. And still, there was silence. No pleas for mercy. No last-minute surrenders. No attacks from hidden defenders. Just silence. "Commander," Drathmar said quietly, "something is wrong." "I know. They should have done something by now. Anything. This is not how species behave when they face extinction." Vithnar stared at the blue planet. He thought about what the analyst Kethora had said. They would rather die than submit. They see survival under our rule as a fate worse than extinction. They are not afraid to die, he realized aloud. Then what are they waiting for? Vithnar did not have an answer. But as he stood on his bridge, looking down at that small, silent world, he began to understand something. The humans had not been hiding. They had not been running. They had not been preparing to surrender. They had been preparing something else. "Full sensor sweep," he ordered. "Check everything. The planet, the moons, the orbital space. I want to know exactly what." The sensor officer's voice cut him off. It was high and sharp with sudden fear. "Commander, detecting launches, multiple launches, from the planet's surface, from orbital positions, from everywhere." Vithnar looked at the tactical display. Red dots were appearing by the hundreds. Then thousands. Then tens of thousands. They were coming from Earth. From its moon. From satellites that had seemed dead. From asteroids that had seemed empty. The silence was over. And as the first wave of human ships and missiles and drones rose to meet his fleet, Vithnar finally recognized the feeling in his chest. It was fear. The humans had been waiting. Not because they were scared. Not because they hoped for rescue. They had been waiting because they wanted every single one of their enemies in range. And now, Commander Vithnar realized far too late, they were. The human ships were ugly. Commander Vithnar noticed that first. Council warships were elegant things, built over centuries of refinement. Beautiful curves, smooth surfaces, technology that looked like art. Human ships looked like they had been built by angry children. Sharp angles, exposed weapons, metal plates bolted together with no care for appearance. They were not meant to be beautiful. They were meant to do one thing: kill. High Counselor Laura Bennett's face appeared on every screen in the Council fleet. She was broadcasting on all frequencies. Vithnar tried to shut her out, but somehow she was on every channel. "You came to our home," she said. Her voice was calm. Terrifyingly calm. "You threatened our children. You demanded we kneel." She smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Here is our answer. What are me their Sakane? I'm Hald Ran." The human fleet attacked. Vithnar had expected a desperate defense. Brave but futile. The kind of last stand that looked good but changed nothing. He had seen it a dozen times before. This was not that. The humans fought like nothing he had ever seen. They did not defend. They attacked. Swarms of small ships dove at his warships, ignoring their own losses. Missiles came from every direction. Weapons he did not recognize tore through his shields. And they kept coming. "Concentrate fire on their capital ships," Vithnar ordered. "Break their formation." But the humans had no formation. They fought like individuals. Every ship picked its own target and attacked without waiting for orders. It was chaos. And somehow, the chaos was winning. A council warship exploded off Vythnar's port side, then another, then 3 more. "Commander, we are taking heavy losses," Drothmar reported. His voice was shaking. "They are targeting our weapon systems. They know our weak points." Of course they did. The humans had been studying the Council's technology since first contact. They had 6 months to find every flaw, every vulnerability, every crack in the armor, and now they were exploiting them all. A transmission came through from one of the human ships, a young woman with fire in her eyes. She was laughing. "You want to know what we call this battle?" She shouted over the noise of explosions. "We call it Tuesday. This is what we do to each other for fun. Did you really think you were special?" Her ship rammed into a council cruiser twice its size. Both vessels exploded together. Vythnar watched in disbelief. She had killed herself on purpose. She had traded her life for one of his ships, and died laughing. What kind of species did that? The battle raged for hours. The council fleet had superior technology, superior numbers, superior everything. But the humans fought with something that could not be measured. Something that turned every defeat into a reason to fight harder. Admiral Kevin Price commanded the human fleet from a station orbiting Earth. He had lost his left arm in the first hour of fighting. He had refused medical treatment. There was no time. "All ships, focus on their flagship," he ordered. "The commander is there. Take him out, and they will lose coordination." Vythnar's flagship was the largest vessel in the fleet. Heavily armored, surrounded by protective ships. It should have been untouchable. 30 human vessels attacked it at once. 27 of them died in the approach. But 3 got through. They fired everything they had into the flagship's bridge. The last thing Vythnar saw was a human pilot, a young man named Chris Parker from a city called Detroit. Chris was smiling. His ship was on fire. He was going to die. But so was Vythnar. The flagship exploded. The commander of the council fleet died in a ball of fire, killed by a human who had traded his life without hesitation. 6 hours after it began, the battle ended. 300 council ships limped away from Earth. 300 out of 500. They had lost 200 warships to a species that was supposed to be primitive, to a species that should have surrendered, to a species that had no chance of winning. But the humans had not tried to win. They had tried to hurt, and they had succeeded beyond anything the council had ever experienced. Back on the station, Admiral Price finally allowed himself to sit down. His arm stump had stopped bleeding. His face was gray with exhaustion. But he was smiling. "Send a message to those ships," he said. "Let them carry it back to their masters." The transmission was recorded by a woman named Susan Blake. She was 67 years old. Her husband had died in the battle, flying one of the small attack ships that had swarmed the council fleet. She had volunteered to speak for humanity. Her face appeared on every surviving council ship. "My name is Susan Blake," she said. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady. "My husband died today. He died fighting your ships. He died protecting our home. He died free." She paused. "You came here thinking we would kneel. You were wrong. You came here thinking we would break. You were wrong. You came here thinking you would teach us fear." She leaned forward. "You were wrong about everything. We were content to stay in our corner of the galaxy. You could have left us alone. But you demanded tribute. You demanded submission. So here is our counteroffer. Stay out of our space, and we will stay out of yours. Send another fleet, and we will build more ships. Kill one of us, and 10 will take their place. Push us to extinction, and we will drag your entire civilization into the dark with us. You have ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years, because no one ever told you no. Get used to hearing it. Because humanity has just begun." The message ended. 300 warships carried it back to council space. The survivors told stories that spread like fire. Stories of humans who died laughing. Humans who rammed their ships into enemies. Humans who fought not to win but to make their enemies bleed. The Galactic Council gathered to decide their response. 17 elder races. 12,000 years of power. The mightiest civilization the galaxy had ever known. They decided nothing. For the first time in their history, they chose silence. They did not send another fleet. They did not make new demands. They did not try to punish the species that had defied them, because they understood something now. Something that changed everything. Humans were not afraid to die. Humans did not fight to survive. Humans fought because fighting was what they did. It was who they were. It was written in their blood, and their history, and their souls. And a species that fought without hope of survival was a species that could never truly be defeated. The tribute order was never mentioned again. Human space remained human. The Council pretended that the small blue planet did not exist, and somewhere on Earth, in cities and towns and villages around the world, 8 billion humans looked up at the stars. They were not afraid anymore. They were hungry.